A lot of men are attracted to the more of the wounded masculine within a feminine, tied up in it within a female. Why do you think that is?
Well, especially for high performers, it usually stems from a subconscious attraction to unavailability. Right. So if a woman is in her wounded masculine, or if any of us are in wounded energy, we have a level of unavailability to ourselves and to the other person. And a lot of the times when a woman is in her wounded masculine, men can misconceive the feeling of attraction with actually just her level of unavailability.
Yeah.
So that makes them feel like, okay, I have to work harder. I have to do more in order to achieve this, which also ties into a subconscious belief that love is an achievement. So when she's shut down, when she's guarded, when she's not receptive, instead of going, okay, this energy doesn't feel very good to me. Instead, it's how do I try harder? How do I continue to overcome her barriers in order to be the man that she wants me to be? So that way I can receive the love that I've always wanted to receive from me. And it's also really important to note, though, that that's one end of it. The other side is a lot of men show up in their wounded feminine.
Yeah.
And as a reflection of that, women are in their wounded masculine. So when a woman, I always say wounded energy attracts wounded energy. So in the same way that healthy energy attracts healthy energy and there's polarity there, wounded energy does the same. So if you as a man are in your wounded feminine, meaning you're people pleasing, you're trying to impress, you are feeling insecure, you're searching for affirmation, well, a woman is going to start to feel guarded. She is going to start to shut down because she doesn't feel safe with that energy.
Yeah.
And with that energy, she then sees that you don't feel confident in your ability to lead.
Yeah.
Not just in dating, but within yourself and your own emotional regulation.
Yeah.
And so she will clench up and she can't relax into her feminine.
Yeah.
Now, when we talk about wounded masculine energy, though, I just want to be clear that, like, if a woman is being critical or berating you in any way or putting you down, I don't care if you're in whatever energy, right? That's not right. And vice versa. So I always reiterate, it is not your job to heal a woman. Right? It's your job to heal yourself, to show up, to be the best match for a woman, also taking ownership and responsibility for her healing.
Yeah. Well, that's what that 6 months is for me. For you asked for mentioned the code. This is my process. Okay. I call it grow, gain perspective, remove roadblocks, organize, orchestrate a plan, and then work the plan. So in the last one, it was gain perspective. Okay, how did I show up in this relationship? How did the other person show up in the relationship? Was it healthy? Yes or no? Did it serve us both? Yes or no? That allowed for me to feel respected and loyal and stuff like that. It allowed for her to feel safe and kind of in a great place. And then I look at it from that perspective. What is it that I kind of portray out, I guess is the best way to say it. Because how did I show up basically? And if I was showing up in a non-healthy way, then I went to work on it. Went to work on trying. Okay, where does this come from? Right. Okay. I didn't have a dad growing up. I had a grandmother growing up. Right. Okay. Well, like, all right, my mom was away. Okay. What does that mean? Like, where did some of the victim, pattern come from? Like all of that. And I would dissect it that way. And then part of organizing my plan wasn't like, okay, I have something to achieve. It was like, I just want to be able to learn more and grow more. So I would, follow your work or read a book or listen to a podcast or anything like that, begin to kind of like open my heart and my mind up to a better way of perceiving kind of what the overall environment is. And then work the plan was kind of the same thing. So I kind of look at it this in the 6 month time frame. The first 3 months is assessment.
Okay.
Right? And then the last 3 months is integration. Okay. What did I learn? What do I need to integrate or pull? And I say integrate, remove and or integrate into. And that has led me into a place of when I do show up. And this is why I think I've met somebody pretty wonderful recently, which is exceptional. Like in the last, we're talking 11 days. We're not talking like a year away from that, which we're obviously very fresh in it. But it's exciting. Yeah, it is. It is very exciting because this is the first time where I'm not trying to be anything other than me. And as a result, she's told me on numerous occasions, she goes, "You make me feel safe. I'm safe with you."
Oh, that's lovely.
And as she's kind of illustrated what safety looks like, I've kind of watched her blossom like a flower. So now I'm trying to be not super protective, but I'm being aware of holding that space of safety, but not, when I say safety, it's coming at a variety of the questions are questions, questions and conversations are uber deep.
Sure.
Like I'm asking because I want to understand, not because I'm waiting for something. Oh, I can, okay, that's cool. I can maneuver there. Right. And I find that it took a long time to get there. It really did. And I'm someone who is passionate about personal growth, personal professional growth. We're in this genre, this lane, if you will. But I underestimated the power of safety. So I'd like to hear your thoughts on why a female is so excited when they find safety in a partner.
Yeah, I love that question. And I love your process too. I think that's wonderful. I have more questions about it. I'll go there.
Sure.
So safety is so important to a woman because the feminine is vulnerable, right? So one aspect of feminine energy is vulnerability. So for a woman to be able to explore that side of herself, to be able to be playful, she has to feel safe. I mean, think about it. Like if you're in survival mode, if you're in fight or flight or freeze, there is no play. There is no flirtatiousness. There is no openness. There is no reflection of self. And when a woman has core feminine energy, right? So she feels like her best self, she's most aligned with herself in her feminine energy. If she can't activate or reach that space because there isn't a level of safety, then she can't enjoy the relationship. And likely the man's not going to enjoy it much either.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of the times too, it's like women have experienced relationships and men also where they don't feel safe. So I would say, yes, safety is definitely important for the feminine, but it's also important for the masculine.
Yeah.
Too.
Especially if we're being vulnerable. Like it took a lot for me to get vulnerable and be transparent with another partner.
Yeah. And I love that you challenged yourself to do that. It feels so good once you do it, right?
Oh, absolutely. Like I feel more authentic.
Feel like alleviated.
Yeah.
The only thing is you do want to make sure that you're not rushing to that level of vulnerability.
Sure.
I see this happen too with men in partnerships is they start to want more and more of that release and that feeling of connection. And so the conversations go deeper. And it's just like, that's the only thing that the relationship focuses on. And then you come up against two things. One is polarity can actually dwindle simply because it just is too much intensity. And so someone shuts down because we haven't talked about this yet, but when it comes to attachment theory, right, someone can get activated in that dynamic. And the second piece is we don't want any trauma bonding, right? We don't want to bond over what scares us to an extent where our entire relationship or something that's hurt us, right, or hurting each other to a place where we're in that sort of bond, because then there's no stability, there's no actual foundation. So yes, vulnerability is really important, but I always say it's necessary to also make sure that the level of intimacy is in alignment with the level of investment, right? So how invested you are in each other at that point in time, because that's what creates safety. And it's not enough to just say, okay, we're both invested in each other and it's you and me and here we go right off the bat, right? That can create some artificial sense of safety and investment, but you still need to have that layer, that foundation underneath that for especially if the woman or the man has had history of being betrayed or having infidelity in their relationships or just having someone leave them out of nowhere or just being hurt. You need to make sure there's that underlying foundation, because otherwise you're on shaky ground and no one knows if it's real or not.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Well, I'm curious on that. Even with the kind of leaning into attachment theory a little bit.
Yeah.
What is authentic, healthy communication? Because obviously, if let's assume you're a high performing male or high performing female, you've had relationships that didn't work out, which is most people at some point in time they had a relationship that didn't work out, if not multiple. You're trying to you have the healthy mindset of going into a situation where, all right, I'm doing the work on me. I'm continuing to do the work on me. I plan on continuing to do the work on me, kind of scenario to kind of make sure that that person stays in a healthy place. But you don't want to go down the track record of being overly vulnerable too soon, too quick. You want to have authentic communication, authentic connection. How do you know which is real and which isn't real?
So I always tell the men I work with that whenever, before you do anything, lead any sort of communication or initiate any sort of communication, you want to understand your motivation for it. So two good questions, or a question to ask yourself is, am I doing this out of a need for affirmation, right? Of wanting more, of wanting to get some sort of safety out of it, right? Whether it be real or artificial.
Yeah.
Because when we look for affirmation, we don't usually, even if we think we get it, we don't feel satisfied with it because we got to find that safety in us first. So are we looking for safety outside of ourselves when we really should be looking for it within us? Or is this a desire for connection? Does this feel like a natural progression of leading the dating process forward and continuing to build in an appropriate way on the level of communication? And you usually can know this from a lens of just checking in with your gut. And this is something that a lot of men have a harder time with, right? Because we get stuck in heads. That's the masculine.
Unless you're naturally intuitive or empathetic.
Okay, I'm not quite sure if I am feeling like this is affirmation or connection. It kind of feels like both. So, right. And that's how you get stuck in your head and start overthinking. So it really comes down to a gut check. And I like to have my men start intuition journals. So this gut check is, write it down, right? Do you think that this is an appropriate escalation of intimacy? Does it feel like it's what you really want to do? Write it down, make whatever decision you want to make from there. And then you can start to look back and go, okay, was that intuition? Or was that just anxiety? Was that a sense of urgency, right? This was something my coach taught me a long, long time ago, and I'm so grateful for it. I love intuition journals. You can also do this from the lens of masculine, which is like my take on the intuition journal, which is a decisiveness journal. So you can look at, okay, here's a decision I want to make. The first instinct of what decision feels good to me in this moment, write it down, take the decision or lead with the decision that you decide, to be able to look back and go, okay, was that first decision that I wanted to make, was that accurate or not? And if it was, but you went back on it, or you were second guessing, well, you need to build more trust within yourself. If it's not accurate, then you need to tap more into your intuition. And that's actually honoring your feminine energy. That's healing feminine, to be able to go into your intuition, into your body. So anyways, I digress back. When you are leading the dating process and you feel like you want to continue to escalate communication and conversation forward, if you're feeling a lot of intensity in the beginning, right? Where it's like you guys want to talk to each other all the time, you're trying to see each other as much as possible, you want to do a little gut check here. Because as I brought up around attachment theory, if two people have insecure attachment styles, whether it be anxious, avoidant, fearful, avoidant, also called anxious avoidant, it's important to pace the dating process in order to stay regulated on both sides. Otherwise, what can happen is one person can start to overinvest and come on really strong and start kind of obsessing about the relationship, getting really invested too soon. And the other person will feel that and want to pull away because it doesn't feel like there's been enough time for that person to get to know them, and or there might be an underlying fear of intimacy, right? Where it feels really triggering to have someone want to get that close. And usually when there is an insecure attachment style, whether it be a fear of abandonment, intimacy, or rejection, there's also usually a level of inherent worth that's lacking. Now, I'm not saying confidence in your career, confidence in your appearance, confidence in your athletic abilities. Those are all external pieces of confidence. I'm talking about your worthiness as a human being, regardless of all those external things. So our mind immediately goes to, oh, if it was that easy to get that person, if they're leaning in this much, what's wrong with them?
Interesting.
Right? What's wrong with them? Because why would they just choose me without me having to actually achieve this? Because in our minds, we feel like we need to be achieved and we also need to be achieving. So a lot of nuances and intricacies to your question, but that gut check is really, really important in asking yourself, is this a need for affirmation? Am I coming to try to make sure that person's still there, that they're not going anywhere, that connection is still there? Am I avoiding some feeling that's uncomfortable within myself and hoping that having a deeper connection with them is going to solve that? Or am I in a really secure, stable, amazing place and want to share this with this other?
Yeah, no, that's awesome. I was thinking too, as you're kind of going through some of these different processes, I don't know that most of us know what a healthy feminine energy is or a healthy masculine energy is. I think most of us are walking around with a certain level of wounding, or at least, that at least at some level. So therefore, I think a lot of it's being driven by the subconscious. It's not something you're consciously aware of until you actually work on it long enough to try to say, okay, well, I feel, okay, what is this? All right.
Yes.
Kind of thing. So talk to me about what a healthy masculinity is, healthy femininity is,
Yeah.
how we kind of look at that to regulate it. Because I find that things are beautiful when polarity is achieved.
Yeah.
So.
So healthy masculine energy is assertive, it's grounded, present, it's decisive, right? So it trusts itself and it's confident in itself. So wounded masculine energy would be aggressive, overly competitive, critical, shut down, emotionally unavailable. Healthy masculine energy is protected, right? Wounded masculine energy is possessive. Healthy feminine energy is open, it's nurturing, it's receptive, right? So the masculine is the giving, the feminine is the receiving. It is playful and flirtatious. It's creative. So think of the masculine as building and the feminine as the creative piece of it, right? Okay. So the head and the heart, ultimately. And wounded feminine energy would be people-pleasing, impressing, being overly reliant on someone else, overly emotional, right? So that vulnerability becomes wounded feminine when it becomes unregulated. Okay. And when the ownership is taken out of it and it's just, here are all my emotions, solve them for me.
Which is a lot.
Yes. My fiance calls it ocean energy.
Ocean energy. Okay.
This is like the wave. He's like, okay, here we go. We got a lot of it over here. So does that answer the question for you?
I think it does. I just want to give some perspective to, again, I had never heard the term masculine or feminine, never really thought much about it. You just kind of go into a relationship, you think, okay, well, we're compatible or we're not compatible, or I know, I would say that in whether it's masculine or feminine, I couldn't say 100%, but when you go at the end of a relationship, the fact that you can review it as, oh my gosh, this broke me. I'm so hurt. I'm so wounded, or I'm so thankful that relationship occurred. I learned all these things. Right. So to me, that's the biggest transition. That's been one of the largest transitions in my life the last couple of years, is I stopped looking at the relationships and started getting gratitude for what I did learn.
Like the Ariana Grande song, right?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Yes, no, I think that's a wonderful way to look at it. And in general, right, when you recognize that life is happening for you, not to you, and you apply that to your relationships, it's huge. And it's true, because relationships are our mirrors. And so we get into every single relationship for a reason. Yeah. There is something meant to be revealed, meant to be experienced, and meant to be healed. And, the relationships that what I have experienced, what I've seen that work the best are the ones where both people recognize there's going to be more healing and make that commitment to continue healing together. Yes. Right? Yep. Nobody's going to be a finished product. Nobody wants that, especially a high achiever. You guys would be so bored. Right? This is no fun. You would find something, that's not gonna happen. So realize that it's about finding that person who's also willing to take ownership and wants to take that journey together without needing perfection. And if you're expecting perfection from someone else and you tend to be that person that finds little flaws in the other person and always has a reason to I don't know about this. Yeah. That's where your work and lies. Yes. Right. So I'm forgetting what your exact question was here. Well, I think we're just continuing the journey, trying to walk through the masculine and feminine as far as what is properly regulated, what's not properly regulated, kind of thing like that. And I know one of the things that you spoke on many times before is a high value man and a high value woman. I don't know that people have ever thought of relationships or partners as being high value or low value, or they're even aware of it. Right. So talk to us a little bit about what a high value man could be and also a high value woman could be. So there's two components to being a high value man or high value woman in the lens of relationships, right? The first is, will you be a good partner? Generally, right? So this includes traits of emotional availability, communication skills, ownership of self, emotional regulation, having your own purpose and passions in life. The things that the ability to fulfill yourself and to feel good within yourself, to bring that into the relationship versus somebody who is looking to fill a void through a relationship, right?
Yeah.
And then the second component of a high value partner is what makes them high value to you, right?
Yeah.
One man, a high value woman, might be a woman who is really driven and independent in her career and is building this amazing thing. And that to him is really amazing. And to another man, it might be like, oh, I want a woman who has been traveling the world and is really open to adventures and wants to experience things and has a different perspective in that sense.
Yeah.
Right. So high value is not just one perspective, right? Because like you said, there is a level of compatibility to it, but you're absolutely right. A lot of people look at compatibility through the lens of qualities and traits, maybe values, right?
Yeah.
We want to get to the value piece, the why. Yeah. Why do they have those qualities? Why do they have those traits? Why are they prioritizing those things in their lives? That's what creates compatibility, but also compatibility through the lens of attachment theory and through the lens of your subconscious programming. Because if someone else is not emotionally available and that's what you're looking for in relationship, then it doesn't matter if you both go to the gym at the same time every day. It doesn't matter if you both like to travel. If that person decides to leave out of nowhere because they can't handle a certain level of intimacy that you are looking for, then you're not compatible.
Yeah. And I think it's wise to be okay with it. Like the relationship ran its course. There's a lot to be learned. There's a lot of beauty in it. I mentioned a couple of times a young lady I've been seeing now for a little while. It's kind of like the agreement is it's beautiful now. Let's see if it continues, kind of thing. It's like we're enjoying it. We're in the enjoyment phase rather than saying, okay, by this time next year, we're going to be buying a house together, getting a dog, like all that kind of stuff. Like the expectation. And I find that gives you freedom. At least as a male, I can't speak for her necessarily, but I find security in that. The fact that someone's just willing to go on a journey with me. And right now we're enjoying the journey, if that makes any sense.
I think that's wonderful. I see a lot of men and people who have been hurt in the past, and I went through this myself before. I'm sure I have too. You want to button up everything and be like, is this person going to hurt me or be my forever person? Yeah. And I think we also get against, clocks and what's expected of us and what we want. And we're in a world of instant gratification. And with dating apps, big fan of dating apps, met my fiance on an app, but with the apps, what I noticed is people get frustrated with it because they think if I have an app for something and it's supposed to make my life easier, that means it should be instant. So I should meet somebody, go on a date, and that's it.
That's a little too quick.
And we get frustrated by it, right? And whether it be conscious or subconscious, that is what we think when we think, okay, I'm on my phone, I order Amazon, it's here in a day, maybe less.
Yeah.
The same should be true for my dating life. If
it's the spouse.
Yeah, it's just so, I think that there's that level of expectation too, that people then go into it who feel like, okay, because we both want the same thing, because we're both attracted to each other, this is going to move forward.
Yeah.
But they don't take polarity into account. They don't take emotional connection into account. They don't take emotional availability into account. And they get confused why they have these short-lived dating experiences, that it seems perfect. Like, oh, I've met this other perfect person. And then they grasp on and they get ahead of themselves. And one person gets triggered around that or notices that doesn't feel safe, right? Because they're looking for a sense of feeling through the relationship. They're actually chasing a feeling, not the person. You don't know the person well enough to know this yet, right? As you're experiencing now, you're like, okay, spend 11 days.
Yeah, things are going great. I love it. This is the best it's been I can remember, but I also have to protect my energy a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah. So I always tell the men, and I talked about this in a webinar that I did last week as a little tidbit, and I'll give it to you guys here too. 3 questions to ask yourself before moving the dating process forward, whether it be deciding to be exclusive or committed, right? We could talk about that too. It's
Mhm.
the idea of exclusivity before commitment and it not, being
Yeah,
together.
sure.
But to ask for exclusivity and or commitment, to say I love you, to decide to move in with each other, to decide to get engaged, to get married, etc. What
Mhm.
do I need to know about this person?
Mhm.
What do I need to feel for this person? And what do I need to experience with this person
Yeah.
to know I want to move forward? And that last one is huge.
I had a quick chance to catch up with you briefly offline before we hop on. And I told you that I had just come out of a long relationship that unfortunately had some narcissism, I think, kind of played into it and whatnot. And part of one of my selfish goals right now is to make sure that I am a healthy person getting ready to go into another relationship. So maybe if it's cool, maybe give me some insight on maybe some of the things that I should be focused on within me as it relates to, having a deeply narcissistic relationship ahead of time.
Well, I usually tell people, I wrote this in Wired for Dating, that people should look for the relationship they want, not the person.
Mm-hmm.
So, if making a list of what the perfect relationship would be with person X
Mm-hmm.
is probably the best thing to do. Most of us look for the person, right?
Mm-hmm.
Describe a person, but not their morals, their ethics, whether they agree with what we want in a relationship, whether they are on the same page with us. Before you get connected, before you get attached to somebody. So that's my best recommendation.
Yeah. Now, I was gonna say, do you recommend like a season of reflection and just kind of like really digging in deep as you're making that list? I mean, like, you don't make the list on a Saturday and start dating on a Monday kind of thing.
That would be a rush list. Like what do you call it? One of those fast delivery things. Make the list really quickly and they deliver what you want. No, because I think it's a meditation.
Mm-hmm.
When you visualize the relationship, when you put down what we would do in a partnership, what we would never do in the partnership, you're basically defining a sense of purpose to the relationship,
Mm-hmm.
other than love, because love is not a great purpose.
Yeah.
Purpose is something that is devoid of feeling. We decide a purpose-centered principle, like we'll have each other's backs at all times, because it serves a function for both of us, even though it could be a hard thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
But we decided that's the best thing we could do, right? So, so thinking about what we would do, not what I would do.
Mm-hmm.
And a period of contemplation about yourself, individual psychotherapy, whatever floats your boat, is always a good idea. But we learn the most about ourselves in a relationship.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it tends to bring the in many cases, we'll call it the best out of us, but it can also bring out the most challenging side of us for sure. I know one of the things that I've been really kind of like not hesitant on, but really just kind of cognizant of is triggers. So triggers from prior relationships that basically lay dormant until they're triggered, so to speak.
Yes.
And I've been trying to find a good way to, I don't know, I won't say pre-trigger them, but deal with the triggers prior to them showing up in a negative way. Because obviously the last thing you want to do in a new relationship is wound the other person by accident, especially when they had nothing to do with it to begin with. And, when I was my grandfather told me to make a list, but he told me to start, character qualities and stuff like that a number of years ago. And my list is probably closer to 2 pages now, where before it used to be like maybe 12 items, to your point of spending some quality time reflecting. But as someone who considers themselves, I feel like I'm in a pretty healthy space. I feel like I'm in a pretty healed space overall. Obviously it sucks to go through any kind of ending of a relationship period, and it's never fun for anybody.
No.
But maybe are there some strategies or techniques to deal with triggers in a healthy way? What I've been doing is the person I just started seeing recently is I was up front ahead of time. Hey, I've been through this type of experience. This is something that triggers me. If I'm aware of it, if I'm not, then I'm trying to just work on it ahead of time.
The first thing I thought of is like somebody blowing up all their buried minds before they get into a relationship.
Mm-hmm.
If only that were possible, that would be great.
Yeah, right.
Great. I'm afraid it's whack-a-mole. because it's not just your last relationship. We're memory animals. Everything we do is by memory. Most of our day is actually memory driven. We're not thinking most of the day. So it's too energy expending. So your memory, when you meet somebody, goes all the way back to childhood, goes all the way back. So that's not true when you meet a friend or when you have a business partner. But when you meet somebody who is potentially a love interest and then they become one, they become what's called a primary attachment object or a primary attachment figure. And the only relationship that's like that one is our earliest ones with the originals, which is why these relationships are so very difficult. So there's a lot of triggers that you don't even know about, just waiting for somebody that you meet. Probably you met them through recognition and familiarity, which means they're going to trigger you and you're going to trigger them. Sadly, no way around it, but there is a way to predict them after you get to know each other. And the way I see it, my way of thinking is that being in each other's care, I'm supposed to, if I were your partner, I'm supposed to be an expert on you. I'm supposed to know you, get to know you and where your triggers are. And I'm supposed to be, a protector of you, not a provocateur. You're supposed to do the same for me because we can't really do that ourselves. If we could, we would, but we never can. So it's done this way. I have to know the animal I'm with. I have to know everything about you, how to approach you, how to talk to you. And I'll learn by blowing myself up.
Which is never fun, especially when the thing is fresh.
It's trial and error. It's learning through mistakes and then hopefully fixing them as soon as we make the mistake and then putting something in place for the next time to prevent repetition between us. Right? That's the key. But there's no way that that's ever going to happen because everything we do is through pattern recognition. Why did you look at me that way? Why did you nod your head that way? Why did you say that word, that phrase? So that's how we roll. We're animals.
Well, it also seems like it also triggers like a physiological nervous system response. And the times that I've been triggered in years past, I had one that crept up on me probably a week ago, and I hadn't experienced it in 20 years. And one of the things that I realized in the moment was my body went into a physiological response that I didn't feel like I had any control over. It wasn't, I wasn't blowing up a dam per se, but I wasn't necessarily being my best self. And as I was kind of going through that triggering event, I was trying to tie it back to an earlier event to see if I could uproot the trigger altogether, So it almost made me pause before I entered, deeply into a potential new love interest or relationship or spending time with somebody on a regular basis. It almost called me and said, well, okay, maybe I'm not ready yet. This one trigger happened. It hadn't, it hadn't been there for 20 plus years. At least I haven't had it trigger in 20 plus years. So is there a point in time to know that you're in a healthy enough place to start to date, start to enter into your relationships or start at that? Or is it really kind of a roll of the dice?
It is a practice, really. It really is. It's not, working on relationships isn't like anything else we do. We can't learn it alone in the cave. That's why people go to therapists, is because it involves another person, right? We're hurt by people and we're healed by people. So if we could do it alone, that would be great, but nobody seems to be able to. So it's, it's done in a relationship. And the trigger, are you talking about a trauma response? Is this an unresolved?
Well, it's funny. After it happened, I spent quite a bit of time trying to. All right, so what had happened was, somebody I was interested in we were away. I literally had we currently live on opposite coast. So I live on the East Coast. They currently live on the West Coast. And the long distance is allowing for a lot of in-depth conversation, which has been great. It was one of the ways we were able to work through this trigger of mine really, really quickly. It's because of all the groundwork or conversations we had earlier, which was good. But for some reason, I had a dream because the time difference was there. I fell asleep, nodded off or whatever. And I had a dream, and I responded to her out of the dream in my waking state. So I woke up the next morning. The dream was almost so real, but even now I can't remember the dream. But it affected me in such a way that I presupposed something had occurred that didn't occur at all, not even remotely close. The person had never given me any evidence whatsoever that dream was even remotely close to reality, but it triggered me in such a way that I responded as if it was true. Essentially, is what it boiled down to.
Now, this person, though, you weren't seeing face to face.
No. In the dream, it was more of almost like a movie play kind of thing. In the waking state, because we're on opposite ends of the coast, there's a lot of FaceTime right now, kind of, FaceTime and calls and travel back and forth. Is kind of what's going on right now.
Did you do that morning, though, when you talked to that person, did you do FaceTime?
In that morning, what had happened was we actually ended up having a text exchange. And in the text exchange, I was trying to articulate that I had been triggered. I wasn't assessing or placing blame. However, in my wording of my response, it asserted blame, or asserted as almost it was just really, really poorly worded. To be honest, then triggered a FaceTime conversation where the person very clearly said, "This is not okay. This is not a healthy boundary," which I appreciated, kind of thing, which I appreciate a great deal. But that's kind of how it got. We worked through it really quickly, but that's what occurred.
So here's what I recommend to everybody: no dealing with anything that's complex, that's emotional, that's anything ever without being face to face. Whether it's on FaceTime or, whatever, but you want to see the face because voice is not a good co-regulator. We're visual animals. We error correct our errors through the visual field, not the auditory, and definitely not through text. Yeah. Text is the absolute worst. Absolute worst.
Absolute worst way to handle a tricky situation. I got you.
because we can't regulate each other through this. We can't regulate each other through the phone very well because we're still visualizing the person according to our state of mind.
Yeah.
So you were in a particular state of mind.
Yeah.
And your state of mind wasn't altered by seeing the face as you talked. That's what I think got you into trouble.
Yeah, it got me in trouble for sure. And the crazy part is when we did FaceTime, literally a few moments later, as soon as I saw her, I realized I was in error.
Yes.
It was instantaneous. Oh, dude.
Yeah.
And I know better. I'm in the personal development space. And so I've been kicking myself all weekend. So
don't worry. Well, I'm just saying this to your audience. Never get into arguments or talk about anything emotional while you're in the car driving, because we're legally blind on the sides. And because we're so visual, when we see a face at a glance, the threat center of the brain actually fires rapidly. So we're set up for a fight. So you always want to be dead on, straight ahead, in order to be safe with each other. Otherwise,
stupid stuff happens.
Yeah, because we make all these errors.
Yeah.
In appraisal without the visual field. Even with the visual field, we make errors less, though. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, it's interesting that you said that, because literally as soon as we had the FaceTime, it was instantaneous. It wasn't even a split second. I was like, ooh, yeah, text. I got this wrong.
Text is shitty. Email terrible, but FaceTime or anything that involves,
direct connection
face to face is a good invention for us.
Okay, well, that's awesome. That's good to know. Fortunately, she's a very strong, character driven woman, and had a lot of grace, and actually proceeded to help me work through it over the next 2 days, essentially, which was good. I think that it made me feel like, okay, I'm actually a little bit safer with her, so if something stupid occurs, I could tell her ahead of time. Now face to face.
Right. It's so funny. I blame this on the answering machine. I'm an old guy. So for me, when the answering machine came out, it was the beginning of caring if people called or how many people called, right? Before, if you were home, you'd answer the phone. When I got an answering machine, we were first adopters when I was a kid. suddenly I started being aware of when people called and if people called, and then you had to call them back, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, now if somebody texts you, you have to text them back, and you have to do it really fast. Text gets people into a lot of trouble, and so does email, because we don't think before we write, and we don't have time to settle in, and it begs impulsivity. So I wish we could all do away with that when it comes to relationships, except, hi, bye, smiling, emoji and everything, and I'll be home at 5:30, but nothing complicated, nothing relational.
Yeah, no, I love that. In fact, this has already been therapeutic already. So this is good. I was just thinking back to a conversation I had with one of my life coaches. I'm sure I'm like everybody else that is seeking, personal, professional improvement on a consistent basis. We have coaches, right?
Precisely.
So we were talking about the difference between a companion and the difference between an emotional entanglement. And because he's helped me try to understand, because, again, I had years of toxic relationships for a number of years, and I couldn't, for life, I was like, why am I attracting these people to my life? I'm looking for my Proverbs 31. That's what I want. Like, help me get there, kind of thing. And he broke it down, and that I thought was pretty interesting, in that an emotional entanglement is when you're trying to solve someone else's needs, or you're only seeking that person to solve a need within you.
Wow.
Rather than the companionship is two healthy and whole people who are already doing the work independently. You mentioned having 6 evolutions of you and your wife. That means you and your wife were growing independently together. And if we use the old triangle approach towards God, right, you're coming closer and closer, which is, I think, is profound. But the companion model allows for the other person to operate in their strengths. You become their cheerleader, but yet you don't get emotionally entangled in trying to solve a need that wasn't yours to begin with. And I know you kind of follow that same philosophy. How did you discover that along the way? Because in studying some of your work, you and your wife's work, you guys really have done a lot of work, especially with helping the future brides to be, or current brides, if you will, women specifically. How did you guys find your direction with that theology, and then helping that particular tribe?
Well, it really came out of me understanding the depth of the pain that my wife's history produced within her. And I was kind of fumbling the ball early on in our marriage, because I was trying to fix those things in her. I was trying, as her husband, I was trying to do what only God could do in her. You know what I'm saying? This was a work that she and God had to work out together, and all I needed to do was just assist. I didn't need to go up for the dunk. I didn't need to score. I just needed to assist. I needed to be in place to support my wife through her journey. I didn't need to push her. I didn't need to pull her. I didn't need to do anything. So I fumbled the ball in that I was trying to be for my wife what only God could be. And it was misunderstood by her as control. She felt like I was trying to control her. She felt like my trying to push her into a state of healing, was trying to manage her. And so I soon realized that this is a personal work that has to happen in her. And then I also simultaneously realized that I had to readdress my my views and even my definition of manhood and what a husband is. And so it was there that we started getting this understanding of the two wholes. It's the illustration we use is like a marriage or union is like a pair of shoes.
Yeah.
You can't, if you go to the store right now and you buy what you think is a pair of shoes, and you open the box and one shoe is whole, but the other is just a sole, it's not a pair.
Yeah.
That was an illegal transaction. They did not they did not sell you a pair of shoes. It's only a pair when there's a whole and distinct right shoe versus left shoe, whole and distinct. And then somebody has the brilliant idea of putting these two whole individual entities together into a box and to sell them as a pair to perform a mission that's greater than either individual purpose. And so we have to do the work to make certain that I'm a whole right shoe. I'm a whole man. She has to do the work to make certain that she's a whole left shoe. She's a whole woman. And then we live in the context of this boxing called marriage or union. But it does not work if we don't continue to do our individual work to show up as whole individuals for each other.
Yeah. Yeah, man, that's powerful. I was actually thinking too that occasionally you have a whole shoe who falls for a shoe with tacks on the inside of the foot, right? Call it the toxic masculinity or the toxic feminine energy, because it'd be both.
Correct.
I think it seems to me that people find themselves in that situation. I was one of these people, so I get to call myself out.
So was I.
It's because you rush into the next relationship. You never really take time. I call it minimum now. Even with my daughter a long time ago, when she wanted to date this young man, I said, just give yourself 6 months of solitude.
Yeah.
6 months of solitude, 6 months of you praying, you fasting, you reading, listening to podcasts. Like, go figure out who you are before you try to force fit yourself into somebody else's mold.
Correct.
Do you find that as being kind of the same thing? Is that's what leads us towards toxic energy of other people? Is that we're rushing into it?
I absolutely believe it, and I'll share some personal experience of my own. My wife is the first woman in my life that I've ever been faithful to. Never intended on being faithful. Never felt like I could be faithful. Never really saw faithfulness modeled a lot. But for my father, who had a real spiritual experience in his life and transformed. But even after I saw his transformation, I was committed to living the life I wanted to live. And so God really got a hold of me at a very young age. And I realized the purpose on my life, but my lifestyle was not aligning with that purpose. And so I met Lisa, my wife, and we were dating for some years. And I said to her, because I had gotten to this point where I knew my purpose, and Holy Spirit had really done some things in me that all of those things in my flesh, those vices, were really subjected to the power of the Holy Spirit. So I said to Lisa, I don't think that I'm going to ever get married. I actually had the idea that I would just do ministry as a celibate preacher for the rest of my life. Here I am, this 20-some-year-old guy, thinking I'm going to be celibate for the rest of my life. So I told her, I said, hey,
I'm glad it worked out for you, because that'd have been tough.
That would have been probably impossible, might be the word. Yeah. And so I said, I know you're a wife. I said, so you should move on. She said, okay, cool. I'll move on and I'll let you have your journey. Can I tell you that it was during that time of solitude, because I released Lisa with no intent of ever having another. I didn't have another girl, none of that. It was just me and God in ministry. And I was doing exactly what you just got through talking about. Yeah. I was studying the word of God. I was I was worshiping. I was digging into God's purpose for me. And then it's like, at the appointed time, I go by my mother's house and my mom says to me, she says, where's Lisa? I haven't seen Lisa for a while. It had been a year since she had seen Lisa. I said, well, I told Lisa to go on. I'm just going to commit myself to ministry. And my mom says to me, like only moms can say, boy, you're not going to be able to be faithful. You're going to be sleeping around. You're going to be doing things you're not supposed to do. You need a wife. She said, go and find Lisa. And I said, now, Holy Spirit, is she right? Holy Spirit said, yeah, Lisa's your wife. But my point is this. It was like God had to send me through that season of isolation. Watch this. Where I knew and I felt in my heart that God was enough for me. And that I didn't need Lisa to help me to circumvent my vices or to bring a sense of fulfillment to me. And it was then that God made it clear to me and approved of me and Lisa's marital covenant. So many people don't have that personal time to connect with the Creator, to connect with God, and to discover themselves.
Yeah.
And so we enter into these relationships with expectation that Lisa's going to give me what only God could have given me in that time of isolation and consecration, or Robert RC is going to give me what only God could give to her as Lisa. I try my best to talk people into taking that time between relationships. Most don't listen to me. Yeah. And they fumble one relationship after another, after another, after another. The greatest way to have a great relationship is to discover the one you have with yourself and your Creator. And that sounds like a whole lot of, hyperbole coming from a faithfully and happily married man. But it was the greatest season of self-discovery and connection to God in my life. Yeah. It was when I had no relationship.
Yeah. I was just thinking about some of God's generals, looking at King David. He learned to be a king while in a cave.
Come on, man.
You know what I'm saying? And I was thinking through that, one of the things, I think there's a big difference between solitude and isolation. Isolation is solitude with disconnection, and solitude is like real truth. It's you with God, it's you working, it's you reading, it's you watching, it's you going, and a lot of people will think, well, if I don't jump into another relationship, what am I going to do with all this energy and all this time? Right. It's like, I'm reading John Gordon's new book, The One Truth. He's a good friend of mine right now. I've probably read 10 or 15 books in the last, 3 or 4 weeks, as I'm now walking out this journey of like, okay, I want to make sure Stephen is good. And this is the first time in my life that I haven't felt the need to be on a dating app, that I haven't felt the need because now it's like, if I'm meant to be single, I'll be single. If I'm not meant to be single, that's okay too. But God will bring whoever this person is in the future to me in that direction. You know what I'm saying? But again, to me, solitude and isolation are very, very different things.
I love that.
So break that down for me, because I watched it trigger some thoughts in your mind.
Well, I'm listening to you, and that's very powerful. I've never thought about it like that, because most people view it as isolation, when it truly is solitude. It's where we really get clarity. And the thing that I recently said on some platform, I forget where I was speaking, the only person that really qualifies to make a great marital mate is the one that's already married to his or her purpose. So when I hear you say, hey, I'm cool, I'm doing what God has called me to do, I'm following purpose, and I'm trusting that God will bring whoever she is into my life. Solitude is where we really get an opportunity to boil our lives down. I forget the author's name, and I'm reading this book now. I'm sure you've probably read it, as voracious of a reader as you are. Essentialism. It's a powerful book if you've not read it. And in this book, this author talks about how, oh man, I wish I had it with me, but
I'm actually writing it down as we speak.
You should write it down. But he gives this visual illustration. This is what I'm just trying to highlight, the power of solitude and really spending time with God and yourself. He highlights, he makes this circle, and he has 2 circles, one here, one here. These circles depict the totality of a person's life. The first circle is a person that never found what is or what was essential to them, because they never had that solitude. They always viewed solitude as isolation. And so with this circle, he has little arrows that just extend just so far, minimal progress going all the way around the circle. That depicts a person's life, what a person's life looks like when they don't find what is essential. They find themselves accomplishing very little of a lot of very little. Then he shifts the illustration to a person who has found the thing that is essential to them, their reason for being, their purpose, the thing they have to individually be married to before they can really qualify to be someone's mate. And there's one arrow stemming from this circle, and it extends the length of the page. same amount of energy in both lives.
Yeah.
But the direction and the intention made all of the difference in the world. Well, when I spent that time in solitude, not defining it as isolation, it was there that God made clear to me the things that were essential for my life. Watch this. This is how I also confirmed further that Lisa was not just a woman I was attracted to.
Mm-hmm.
She was not just a woman that was a friend. She was not just a woman that I liked, but she was a woman that was a purpose partner.
Mm.
But so many of us, because we, and I love it, man, because we define, that time alone as isolation, we miss the value that season is to bring into our lives.
Mm. What does it mean to you to really follow love's lead?
Yeah, that's such a good question. I think the idea of following love's lead would be, for me, at a couple different vantage points. One thing is there's some people that love God a lot, but they don't seem to like the people he made. And what he made is difficult people. And you can't say you love God if you don't like the people they say bear his image. Mm-hmm. And granted, we screw it up and we're difficult and cranky and start wars. And but we also do beautiful things as well. And so following love's lead, when it comes to expression of your faith, is to realize that God is doing different things in other people's lives than he's doing in my life right now. Yeah. So I just assume that God is up to the same things in your life as he is in mine. And the fact is, I don't know, are you having a grandkid this week?
I haven't had one this week, but I did have one about 2 months ago.
Yeah. So some of the things that we have in common, we'd say like, oh, wow, grandparents.
Yeah.
And then you could just say, I don't know, do you have any fainting goats?
I don't have any fainting goats, but I do have a sleeping dog.
There you go. It's like the dog fainted without clapping your hands. But can you see how this is Acts 2 and 4? It said they broke bread together, they pounded the carbs, and then they had things in common. Yeah. At the Philippians 2:20, it says, you don't need a Bible verse for everything, but I'm actually kind of a Bible verse guy. And Paul is talking about Timothy. He says, I don't have anybody like him. He's a guy that takes a genuine interest in the people around him. Yeah. And I just like that idea, whether faith is a big deal for you or none of the above. Did you say, what if we took a genuine interest in one another? Like I just delighted in knowing you're a grandpa, a couple months, freshly minted.
Yeah, it's a beautiful thing. Yeah.
Yeah. And so we can just say, what do we have in common? And this isn't going light on doctrine. It's going big on Jesus. Yeah. That's how you follow love's lead.
Yeah. No, it's so good. I'm one of the things that I love you say, and I've heard you say it 1,000 times, is, this concept of focusing across the street versus across the ocean.
Yeah. Bingo.
Yeah, I love that.
I started maybe 4 years ago. We started doing some stuff in Afghanistan with these young girls that the Taliban would learn how to read and write. And within a couple of weeks of the takeover, we had that girls' school back open again. Is that crazy?
That is amazing.
We just asked them. We just said, can we open our school? And they said yes. And so we did. I don't want to make a headline. I want to make a difference. That's why you haven't seen it in any of the headlines. Yeah. So I think of the things that we can do across an ocean, which are wonderful and terrific. And if God gives an opportunity, do it. But then 10,000 Afghan refugees fleeing the country all landed in San Diego. And so we bought a truck that's refrigerated, and we just get a ton of food. And we really take this thing in Matthew 25 seriously about loving your neighbor. I don't think it's a metaphor for something else. Yeah. I think because if it ain't happening at the end of the street, don't talk about going to the ends of the earth. Yeah. And you can do both. It doesn't need to be binary. Both of them are terrific in each in their own way. And so I'm not trying to point a bony finger in anybody's direction. I'm just saying, like, do something really kind. You might have a mail carrier that comes to your house every day. Give them a glass of water. I mean, it's right out of Matthew 13. Even if they deliver, like mine does, the mail to the wrong place, I get my neighbor's bills. You want to do something awesome? Pay your neighbor's bills. Just
Uh-huh.
blow them
Yeah.
away. I guess it's a federal offense to open the mail,
mail.
but just guess how much they owe.
But if they pay their bill, they may not turn you in, right? So there's that.
Yeah, exactly. But that's getting really practical, because
Yeah.
I met people with great doctrine and lousy theology again. And
Mm.
I want to have great theology, and loving
Yeah.
people, following love's lead is great theology.
Yeah. It's funny. I'm as an entrepreneur and a business owner and someone who's been through a tremendous amount of adversity growing up. One of the things that I've learned about myself is actually following love's lead is nothing more than what Christ told us to begin with, which is treat people how you want to be treated. Love your neighbor as yourself. Right. So
Yeah, bingo. It's a
if
good,
you want dignity and
it's a good
respect, go after it.
Yeah, it's a good starting point to just say, hey, how would I feel about that?
Yeah.
And so what'll happen, it's easy when you have easy neighbors. I mean, some of my neighbors are just delightful. And others, there's a guy that parked his car in the grass strip I just planted on the lawn. And he planted, like, you missed the curve, buddy. We went right up on the turf. And so what are you going to do when somebody gets in your grill or gets in your lawn?
Mhm.
And that's the practical stuff.
Yeah.
And we lead these incredibly conflicted lives. I teach at Pepperdine Law School, which still cracks me up. They wouldn't let me go there, but they let me teach there. And on my way there, I was behind this car, this red convertible, whatever it was, and the license plate said Amish. And I was thinking, he lives just as conflicted of a life as I do. I think he was just a guy in a hurry. He wanted a convertible, and he's like, I'm still in on the Amish thing, but I got to get there in style. So what I did is I just took note of that. I took a little picture. I'm like, oh, I totally want to remember this. And not to make fun of him, but to inform me, to just remember this Romans 7 thing that Paul's like, I keep doing what I don't want to do, and I don't do what I do want to do. And that's just Tuesday and Wednesday and Thursday and Friday and Saturday for me.
And it's really happening for us all on a continual basis. I think all of us are, at some level we're struggling with this, that, or the other thing. I had a good friend of mine that was on an airplane. He was a pretty well-known speaker and traveling the country. And, he had a long day. And then a lady came in to basically get in the, kind of sit. She wanted him to move out of the seat that he actually had, a ticket for. And, after a lot of back and forth, he finally just moved as a kind of like an act of grace. And he found out the lady had just lost her husband, her house, and all this kind of stuff all at the same time. And he said it was a great reminder to him about oftentimes people are living, kind of from that emotional inside, and not every time does it come out appropriately on the outside.
Yeah. Like the idea that there's more to the story.
Yeah.
If people see me wearing a Red Sox hat, which is always, and they don't know that this is the Red Sox hat that my neighbor who went to heaven left. And I told her, I'll represent the Sox here on earth for the rest of my life. And you got to mention my name to Jesus.
That's right.
Every time you see him. But to just know that there's more to the story.
Yeah.
And I really liked it. It's Psalm 107. It's let the redeemed of the Lord tell their story.
Yeah.
Some people say it says say so, and it's all of that, but it actually says tell their story. So tell your story. Let people know what it is, and then take a genuine interest in other people's stories.
Yeah, no, I think that's a beautiful thing. I've always had this saying, and it's something that I dealt with when I was kind of growing up and stuff like that. I would notice that when people would talk at me, I would shut down. But when people were naturally curious or inquisitive, I would open up. So I always said that, questions open hearts and statements close them.
Oh, wow. That's really well said. I like that. If you're listening to the podcast, I want you to take notes on things, like the things are going to be said that you're going to want to loop back to. You're going to want to remember. And so people that have changed the world the most were people that took notes. Yeah. They just took note of what was going on. And so, good words. Yeah,
no, it's great. Well, the other thing that I like that you shed light on in this attitude of service, this attitude of community is, number one, we can all do it. But specifically at the Matthew 25, you kind of break it down in simpler terms about who we can serve if we would just let ourselves serve them. Would you mind breaking those different people groups down? Because I feel like it might resonate with folks, and they might actually start to activate essentially serving those folks.
Yeah, like the folks that come to mind are the people that pick your lettuce, the people that bag your lettuce, the people that work as clerks and that check you out, and that and even though you got in the wrong line and they're really difficult, just so slow, your clothes are going out of style. But I just want to interact with the people that are in front of us. That idea of love your neighbor, just think of love the people that are adjacent to you. And some people are adjacent to us. For our friends in Ukraine, they're going through a really difficult time. But there's probably some people in Russia that are going through a really difficult time too. Instead of trying to figure out who's the villain, who's the victim, and I'm crystal clear on who's the victim in this. It's Ukraine, period. But that said, there's a lot of friends on both sides of a border that are really going through a difficult time. One of them is just acting in an untoward way. And you can't say you love God if you don't love these people. I want to love the nice people. I want to love, the lop-eared rabbit. I want to love the people that are kind and humble. And I don't want to love jerks. Because you want to kind of bring them down. In Australia and the UK, they talk about a tall poppy. Like if somebody's been kind of like thinks more highly of themselves than they should, they say that guy's a tall poppy. And the thing about tall poppies, they get cut down and put in vases. That was just the first thing that came to mind.
That's very true.
The saying that there's two types of people in the world, people who are humble and people who are about to be.
And I can attest that is absolutely true, for sure.
I'm in category number 2. I want us to make it work in the middle of all this crazy going on. And that was really, I was trying to find a book that would help me get less distracted by everything going on. And I couldn't. So I just wrote my own. I called it Undistracted. And the crazy thing is, even though I wrote a book called Undistracted, I'm still distracted. I actually went out in the morning to watch this beautiful sunrise. And I don't have a fancy boat, but it's kind of unique. And so I got out we've got a little pier behind the house, and I went out and watched this epic sunrise. I was like, that was awesome. And I went back in to start my day, and I'm sitting by the fire, and I look out the window and I see another boat had pulled into the bay, just like mine, way on the other side. And I got the binoculars out because I hadn't seen one like mine in a decade. And I looked, it's my boat.
That's funny.
Actually, had driven back to the dock. I got out of the boat and I was so delighted by the sunrise. I walked away. I never tied it to the dock.
That's being
and I'm like, you got to pull that book off the shelves. So even though we have this big ambition, I'm going to be more loving, and then we miss the opportunity to, because there's somebody who's a tall poppy that we run into, and we just go like, it's me again. But I just want us to know that remind us that we're just in desperate need of a savior. We're just like desperately in need of a God that would care and help us out. When we passed January 19th, I kind of giggled to myself, because that's the year they did the date each year. They do a survey of sports clubs and health clubs and fitness centers. And out of 32 million people that sign up for fitness centers, that is the average of the date they all quit. January 19th. They're like, nah,
I'm good. Give me the burger.
I just do one or two push-ups every year, whether I need it or not. But to just say, maybe we have the freedom to, even though we have a long history of creating some strife in people's lives, the injustices, the biases that we carry in, but we could just quit. You could just say, you know what, that's old me. New day, new Bob. And new Bob is here, and new Bob's going to be a little bit less prickly. New Bob is going to be a little bit, because it's easy to write a book called Love Does or Everybody Always, until you might meet somebody you don't like. And you say like, well, everybody always except that guy.
So what do you think has changed in our social environment that's caused the vast majority of us to move away from more of the traditional practices that were working consistently for happy, healthy marriages? I mean, one thing I've seen in the book is obviously people are saying too busy, too tired, get home, I'm burnt out, I don't want to, that kind of thing. I also would, and maybe this is an area that I haven't heard you dig into yet, but I know for a man, if he has a bad performance, so to speak, it haunts him where the woman, it seems like, will grow increasingly more frustrated, even though she might be nurturing on the front end. So I'm curious, like, at what point does the mind play a role, I guess, in kind of how
100%. Hormones affect mind, but mind affects hormones.
Okay.
Hormones affect mind. So if my hormones are low, biologically, I'm going to produce cortisol. Cortisol inhibits my ability to think rationally. That's what's happening in the world. When everybody's afraid, they can't think rationally. What happens is blood flow stops to the prefrontal cortex, and you go into a non-logical state where you're dependent on authority to tell you what's right. Just blindly believing in authority is a child thing. It's a child part of the brain. It's our basic programming, which is do what mom and dad say, do what the government says, do what the police say. So all you have to do is create fear in somebody, and they will become mindlessly obedient. What's happened is when women are doing their jobs that are producing testosterone, if they don't have marriage to support them in producing the estrogen, where they feel I'm taken care of, I don't have to do it all alone, I have a partner in life, I've got backup here, and I have a new kind of emotional support, which we'll talk about, which my father didn't have to do, which is listening to women's feelings and women learning how to go deeper into their emotions and share them. While we say women are more emotional, they're not really good at sharing emotions. Okay. I'm a therapist. I sit in here, I'm paid lots of money to actually feel what they're feeling. For example, if somebody's angry, they're really afraid. And if somebody's afraid, they're also angry. You got to look at the depth of feeling. So women haven't been trained that way. They don't have to be trained that way to connect with another woman, which is why you'll see so many gay couples today. A woman can just say, I was stuck on the bridge today. And the other woman goes, yeah, I understand how you feel. But if a man's going to understand how it feels, he's not going to understand. I've been stuck on the bridge. I just put on a good song.
I'm not got an audiobook.
So I'm not going to instinctively relate to what a woman emotionally feels when she says, I was stuck on the bridge. But what happens is, if women can become emotionally intelligent, which is, I was stuck on the bridge. I was so frustrated because I was late and I wanted to get there on time, and I felt disappointed. This happens again and again. Ever since we moved here, I can't seem to get places on time. I'm afraid this is going to keep up, and I might be judged for being late. I feel really bad, or I'm so embarrassed because I was late. You see, that's emotions. That's what I call emotional intelligence.
Yeah.
If you want to be able to communicate to a man, and he will penetrate you, he will experience your feeling, because we can relate to any emotion. It's just that what makes you feel the emotion we may not relate to, and we may not even agree with or validate. If a woman says to her husband, I feel like you don't love me anymore, how's it going to validate that statement? How can I say you're right?
Yeah, you're wrong. Yeah. I've unfortunately been in those circumstances before, and there is no right thing to say. And at least,
I'm going to tell you what to say.
All right.
He says, I feel like you don't love me. You can't say, you're right, I don't love you. But women are seeking, the word now is affirmation. Before the word was validation. I need to affirm that I'm with you here. I can understand where you're coming from. So I can say to her, I understand that must make you sad. See, now I can validate that you feel sad. I can't validate that you feel I don't love you. I can understand you having a bad day, you feel ignored. But even when you feel ignored, I'm not ignoring you. And I in my world, I'm not ignoring you. I'm working all day to make money to support this family. I can ignore you. See, we'll see it through our eyes, but to actually connect with her so she doesn't feel like she's just being completely ignored, I can validate the emotion, which is, and you were right in saying, you don't immediately say something. You say, help me understand that better. Tell me more. What happened? What were you expecting? You can ask questions, but at a certain point, they need affirmation. And the affirmation comes, I understand that must make you so sad. I understand that, that must be scary. See, this is validation of emotion, but women are not good at identifying the emotion that goes with the feeling. That's a confusing statement for most people. I feel you don't love me is not an emotion. I feel betrayed by your action. I feel you cheated me. Okay, those are just thoughts that you feel.
Yeah.
And that's the worst thing to do. Ideally, we're suited to feel emotion. When you feel a thought, you actually give 100% belief into feeling it, as opposed to, well, I think today you don't love me anymore. I think our relationship's going down the tubes. And a man will tell me more. Why do you think that? So you can be in a logical conversation. He'll link in there. But if you have a feeling, what women have to learn is when you're going to feel something, if you're feeling a thought and you're not happy, the thought is wrong. Except when you feel something and it's negative, your thinking is off. So when you feel, I feel unheard, I feel important, it could be true because it's a positive feeling. I feel happy. You see, when it's positive, we're aligned with our soul. When it's negative, we're off track in some way. And so when you feel something and it makes you feel bad, you're not connected with what's true. But what you are have the access to feel, which would be true, is when I feel bad, I actually feel afraid nobody's going to like me. Whatever it is, bring the emotion to it. And here's what happens when women learn to do this, is they'll suddenly connecting to half the world. See, women feel, men don't understand. So that means you're disconnected from the whole world. You get one man who actually can understand your emotions, and now you're connected to the world. You know, women will understand you, but can men? Again, it's another dynamic of, am I alone in this world? You know, I'm alone if I'm safe being alone away from men if I have women, but double that if you've got men. And when a woman says to me, you know, these women take my classes, I just thank you so much. You know, my husband, we're so happy together, we're so connected, because they feel seen, they feel heard, because they learn how to communicate in a way. And for us guys, we can learn how to listen in a way that makes it safe for her to eventually get back to her emotions. But I'll tell you, that's the long route.
Yes.
If you know, sometimes couples will say, we've got young kids, we can't come to your workshops. Who should come, the man or the woman? Always the woman should come. Women are embedded in, they feel the need for relationship 10 times more than men hormonally. See, relationship is what stimulates estrogen, you and me. Whereas for men, it's not so much relationship, it's the relationship of me with my work, with my outcome, with what I can do. You know, this is, so as a little tip for the men, don't even think about being in a relationship with a woman until you can be happy achieving your goals. See, if you don't feel good about achieving your goals, you'll find some woman and you'll become like a child, depending on her to make you happy. Now, I do depend on my wife to become happier. Okay? You know, intimacy and family life takes me to another level. But I first have a foundation of, you know, if she's in a bad mood and can't give me anything, I feel good about myself. I'm not depending on her happiness for me to feel happy. Although it's still true, when she's happy, I will take credit for it and feel good.
Well, it seems to me that in some cases, people are searching for their own validation and affirmation in the wrong places. One of the things that I kind of dawned on me.
A profound thought. Just look at that. I just want to acknowledge that for men, looking for your affirmation through what you've accomplished, through what you've achieved, through what you're capable of, what sacrifice you made. I mean, all I have to do is fast for 2 days and I feel a huge surge of testosterone, you know, so I did that. Many people can do that. You know, I did it with, you know, this is the dynamic of an accomplishment or a sacrifice that you made in order to achieve a noble goal. You know, it's noble. And that's masculinity. When women do that, they don't feel better.
Well, that's the other thing too, is I've been, and this is, I'm just being vulnerable here. I've had relationships in times past where we have that duality, the polarity that seems like it's all in vibes, almost like you have the soulmate connection and things are firing all cylinders, everything's great. And then obviously you're in the relationship for a period of time, your relationship goes through various stresses that can affect, you know, outside world, you know, going through a business reversal or any number of things. And one of the things that I've seen that's not as attractive to me is when my former female partner would go into a super masculine kind of posture, because I'm very comfortable in masculinity. I'm still learning my feminine side to kind of be that empathetic listener and kind of still like, and you know, tell me more, how, you know, getting into that questioning scenario. In fact, it was actually that lesson that taught me one of the things that I've shared from stage before is that questions open hearts and statements close them. Because I learned for a long time ago, it was like, you know, I would make comments trying to understand, but I wasn't asking questions. And therefore I never really got any track record. The moment I'll tell you where the idea came from. Asking questions. There's a video on YouTube that's called "It's Not About the Nail." Have you ever seen it before?
Yeah, it's so funny. It's based on
I love that video.
It's always it's women will, regardless of the practical solution, women need to talk about the problem, and they don't want solutions. And then that's in Men Are From Mars. And then they took that and made the funniest video in the universe.
I love that video.
Tell everybody the name of it so you can go watch it.
Yeah, well, I mean, when I searched it was called "It's Not About the Nail." So,
and so basically, I don't want to give the punchline. Let everybody go watch it. That's funny. But basically, a woman could be upset about something, and there's a solution. Like, you can find it in a minute. Logically, there's a solution, which in most situations, men do this. Women will be talking about something, and they'll say, "Don't worry about it. It's not a big deal." Like, that's going to tell her not to be upset. You got to just do this, or who cares about that person anyway? I learned this right away in my marriage because my wife was working her job. I was working my job, and I'm making more money than her. And she was complaining about her job. She's so exhausted. Oh, I did this and had to do this. Nobody's supporting me. And honey, just quit that job. I can support you. She goes, John, I don't need you to tell me to quit my job. I know I can quit my job. I love my job, but some days I just need to talk about my job. All you have to do is listen and give me a hug. And I'll give a few more phrases for guys to use when you give that hug. When you have all these solutions that you would apply so you wouldn't be upset, she just needs to talk about it out loud. And that will raise her estrogen. That will take away the stress feeling. She can look at the situation very logically at that point. And then what you say to her is, this is a good phrase men can use again and again and again. It's just like a phrase saying, I love you. It's, honey, you do so much for so many people. Let me give you a hug. You see that? That's okay. Just like there's no solution, just like
and the Greek sex occurs. No, it's funny. I was just thinking too. One of the things that I discovered by accident that worked was, as a man, I was not great at listening because I'm used to fixing and solving problems all day long. It's what I do. So I literally got to the place where I would say, yeah, exactly. So I got to the place where I would say, okay, is this one of those times you want me to listen and nurture, like be present with you, or is this one of those times you are open for advice?
That's nice. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Another phrase we would use is a Mars talk or a Venus talk. A Mars talk, one of my brothers said it was the favorite part of my book because his wife is very emotional. And he said for them to learn, are we doing a Venus talk? Are we doing a Mars talk? And in Venus talk, I'm just going to listen and validate and seek to understand, not try to solve anything. And then if we want to do a Mars talk, we're going to leave feelings out of it. Okay. You can't talk about feelings that get hurt because, see, if somebody shares a feeling and then you basically, you don't need to feel that. Boom. That person just felt attacked. Okay. Yeah. You don't need to feel that way, particularly if you're a woman. Now, I have a men's group, and in my men's group, I rarely get upset about anything. But one of the guys was listening too much to the authorities, and I was just upset with him. Okay? Yeah. And I was just really annoyed that he would think that. And I got angry at him. And as soon as I got angry, all my group member men, they started laughing. And they said, "Oh, John, I think you're overreacting." I said, "Okay, you're right. I am overreacting." Okay to say to a man, you're overreacting. We know we are logically, anytime you're, my belief system, anytime you're upset, you're overreacting.
Yeah. Yeah, dude, you're right. Yeah, you're right. No worries. Yeah.
We're the samurai warrior, I mean, this is grounded in masculinity. And, there's all these pansy university professors who say, oh, poor men, they're expected to be so tough and they're expected to have no emotions. That's right, men. You got to suck it up. If you're upset, you need to know what's going on. Your estrogen levels are soaring and your masculinity, your testosterone's going down. See, this is how people don't know this. This is like a revelation that we want to be masculine, right? We want to be cool, calm, and collected. We want a heart open. We want to be loving guys. So in order to have your heart be open, your testosterone levels have to be really high, and then your estrogen goes up. See, feeling is estrogen. But if your emotion's going up and it's a negative emotion, your testosterone's going down. So it's like, I don't shame a man, you know, for being in his emotions. But if it's just guys around with guys who understand this stuff, we make a joke about it. See, guys joke.
Yeah.
I really saw the validation of this concept because I'm not an emergency worker, but a fireman is. And I had a fireman in one of my classes, and he says, John, when you talk about men have to make jokes to lighten things up as a part of processing their stress.
Mm-hmm.
Some firemen, that he said, as a fireman, when we're driving away, we make jokes about, that charred body, it just dissolved right away. They light it up. Boy, that lady sure would have been better if you done, I don't know what jokes, but they have to lighten it up. And then they sort of find their equilibrium. And if they need to explore feelings, they can. It's not that men can't explore feelings. There's an old Chinese, which I subscribe to. It's an old Chinese phrase, which is a man, not a child. A boy can cry. A man doesn't cry unless his heart is broken. Mm-hmm. That basically means when there's a big problem, then a big loss. Of course, tears are part of the grieving process. But generally speaking, biologically, now I'm not just going to talk logically, I'm going to talk biologically. If a man's experiencing adrenaline, this is moderate stress. There's two sources of, there's motivation, which is dopamine. And then when there's danger in motivation, like you're driving, if you have speed limit 60, you're now going 80. So you need to look in your rearview mirror, make sure there's no police. You need to be, deer, whatever. Okay. So there's moderate danger, but you feel confident that everything's going to be fine. So notice what happens in your body when you go from 60 to 80. That's called adrenaline. Adrenaline pumping. And then when you go from 80 to, well, for fun, let's just say 110. And you're not 110. Like that. Okay.
I like my sports cars. It's good.
Well, I have one. For me, it was 150, but I couldn't do corners on 150. But just to do that was, that's producing cortisol. Okay, so there's different wiring in our body. When a man experiences adrenaline, different from a woman. When a man experiences adrenaline, that's moderate stress, different levels. His emotions turn off. Actually become cool, calm, and collected. That's why these people who climb mountains and whatever, they're addicted to freedom from negative emotions. I mean, they're just getting endorphins in their brain, and they're basically, and because they're so confident, you have to have huge amounts of confidence. They're just producing dopamine. But then when there's danger and they're still confident, then there's going to be adrenaline. And when the adrenaline kicks in, he's free from negative emotions. You become free from fear. You're basically detached. You can measure adrenaline in a man's body. Blood flow stops to the emotional part of the brain. Stops.
Yeah.
Now, woman, adrenaline, moderate stress, right? Adrenaline, that they live in a sea of moderate stress. Okay. Adrenaline amplifies the flow of blood flow to the emotional part of the brain by 8 times. 8 times more emotion in a woman. That would be 8 times more anger, or if she's more inclined to feel disappointed and sad, like a victim, or fear, or it could be feeling bad. And then those emotions give rise to judgmentalness and feeling overwhelmed and a whole bunch of things from there. But that negative emotion, the blood flow going to her emotional part of the brain goes up when she's having moderate stress. For men, it goes down. That's why when women are upset, we will always think they're overreacting. Because for us in that same situation, we would have less emotion.
Yeah.
See? And so a woman could actually get emotional with us, which then produces a bit of adrenaline in us, and then we detach.
Yeah,
okay,
it's true.
Disconnecting with thinking what she's saying here, that's the first stage. Then what happens for men, if you're in adrenaline state and now you're feeling, I'm not confident, okay, you lose your confidence, then adrenaline turns into cortisol. And when cortisol happens, there's a process of now his estrogen levels will continue to rise and his testosterone will start going down.
Wow.
So then we become emotional when we think problems are big. Women become emotional when they think problems are little.
Wow.
We think they're saying problems are big.
Yeah.
Always saying, why are you upset about that? It's no big deal. She goes, I know it's no big deal, but why are you disconnected?
Why aren't you upset?
So we can't, unless we have a higher intelligence that realizes she's reacting with emotional upset. And we think she's saying it's a big thing when actually it's a little thing that's upsetting her. When it becomes a big thing, when a woman is in the cortisol state, when women are in cortisol, their testosterone levels are rising, and their emotions are going down, down, down. So this is when the woman is saying, I want to leave my husband. And well, how does that feel? I feel nothing. And the guy thinks when she says, I'm ready to leave, he thinks, oh, we just need to work out the problem. No, she's in the chronic cortisol state where she no longer has any emotions or feelings about you. He stops caring. Okay. Whereas a man, when he's in that cortisol state, his emotions start to get the better of him. For her in the cortisol state, her testosterone gets the better of her. And testosterone as a virtue is detachment. Now, people don't understand how powerful and wonderful detachment is for men. When a man is detached, it means his testosterone is up and he can be empathetic without being reactive.
Yeah, it's true.
Detachment doesn't mean disinterest. Okay. It doesn't mean or uncaring. Detachment just means I'm not reacting defensively to what you're saying. I can actually be present, which we're trying to do is let me put my emotions to the side, my reactivity. Like, what does that mean to me? You know, if she's saying you forgot to leave the toilet seat up, you know, well, that's about me. So I have to be able to not react as if it's about me, but my reaction needs to be empathy, which is about her. Well, tell me what happened. Did you fall in the toilet seat? Oh my gosh, that's terrible. Okay. I'll try to remember next time. All right. Yeah. So that's an empathetic response, which is in responding about her, not right away going into defensiveness, which is hard for men to do because we're defenders, you know, we're the policemen, you know, we're geared. If somebody's threatened, I got to defend. So we need to shift that to, I need to defend her against any judgmentalness that I might have, and to know what that judgmentalness sounds like to her when we interrupt her with solutions. Or here's worse, we laugh about that's ridiculous, honey. Why would you be upset about that? Oh, you know, this is just your stuff. This is your childhood coming back. Oh, you probably had a bad day. You don't want to dismiss. See, what we're doing as men, which is what we need to do in order to get out of cortisol, is get back into the adrenaline state, which is basically minimize emotional reactions. That's what men will tend to do is, that's not such a big deal. I can do it. That's very important to do if you're testosterone. But if a woman is needing to express, we don't want to minimize, we want to amplify. We want to give her more permission to be upset without it affecting us. Now, women can learn from that. If you have something critical of your partner, or you want to complain to your partner, you're just knocking down his testosterone. This is you're killing the polarity when you complain to a man. If women could just learn not to complain. A complaint is really just a request. Okay, it's
just phrased not great.
Well, it's actually a manipulative statement, which is when it's a complaint, it's saying unless you change, I won't be happy, as opposed to I'm not going to ask us, would you do that? Well, no, I don't want to do that. Okay, there's no emotional demand at the end.
Yeah,
we know that they control us, and or some women act like they don't know, so maybe they don't know, they don't have that awareness. Women. One of my friends teaches seminars, so I'll give him credit for it. Warren Farrell. He'd be a wonderful person to interview as well. He wrote with me The Boy Crisis, but he's written a book called Why Men Are the Way They Are. Great in-depth exploration of men. And in his workshops, he asks the audiences, he says, now who feels like they criticize too much? And when all the women will raise their hands, okay? And many of the men don't, because they don't, okay? And we don't want to be criticized, so we don't criticize. And how many people feel like they complain too much, and the women will all raise their hands? And how many people feel like they're too controlling, and the women don't raise their hand? But every man will say, what are my 3 complaints? She's critical, she complains, and she's too controlling. So he has to help women understand why a man experiences feeling controlled by a woman. It's because our testosterone, our well-being will go up if she's happy. And if she's unhappy, our testosterone will go down. So if she phrases her request I'm really unhappy, and I'll be even more unhappy if you don't change. What is he going to feel?
He's going to feel like he has to, quote unquote, change or concede.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And that's called feeling controlled. So when women use criticism or complaints from a place of, you're not making me happy, and if you do this, then you'll make me happy. Otherwise, I won't be happy. You're just controlling this man, and no woman wants to feel controlled by her husband. No man wants to feel controlled by his wife. So if women understand that more, they can realize these emotion-packed complaints are unproductive, but a request is productive. So here's an example of my wife being upset with me for not turning on the light for 10 years, turning off the light in the living room. I'll go through, turn it off sometimes, but lots of times it'd be left on. All she knows is the times I leave it on, right? And so she's walking through, oh, the light's on again. John hasn't turned on. I'll have to turn off the light. And in the beginning, she would ask, and then I would do my best, but sometimes forget, right? There's the little things that actually build into the big stuff in marriages. So this is an example of what she did to solve it. First of all, I didn't change. I just kept, maybe I changed a little, who knows, but she would, every time I leave the light on, she'd give me disapproval. You left the light on again. And I'm looking at, why is she making a big deal out of this, right? Just the light switch. What's the big deal? And we'd have conversations about it. She'd say, it's the electric bill. So I solved that problem. We have free energy. So if you have free energy, who cares if the lights are on? Well, there's light bulbs, evidently. But whatever.
Yeah.
But she one conversation, she even said, look, we have to be an example of energy conservation for ecology. Okay. So, and what I had to do was not laugh. I said, well, that's true. We should have good values. Okay. So, and of course, if I did laugh, it would minimize her values. So we have to be careful how we respond to women. But why was she getting so upset as the years passed? Because in her mind, again, her not understanding men, in her mind, I've asked him 10 times and he still hasn't done it. It's such an easy thing for her to do it. Must be an easy thing for him to do. I've asked for 10 years and he hasn't done it perfectly. That must mean if I ask for something little and he won't do it, he must not love me. What if I ask for something big? See, the reality is, you ask for little stuff, men forget it all the time because we're designed to think of the big stuff.
Yeah.
We get paid for the big stuff. We save lives doing the big stuff. We get statues to us for the big stuff. We get promotions for the big stuff. And we make our family happy by the big stuff. So how the little stuff's not that important. There's not a lot of motivation inside of that man. But that same man who says, gee, if you won't do little stuff for me, how can I trust him to do big stuff for me? How can I depend on him? Of course you can depend on him for the big stuff. This is little stuff. But her mind isn't wired that way. See, in her mind, if doing little stuff is a way of showing love, which now we can flip that around and for men to realize the logic here. If you do lots of little things, women feel really loved.
Yeah.
You do a big thing, they feel loved. But, the principle is...
They notice the consistency.
That's right. The consistency. It's consistency. It's give her 50 roses once a year, you'll get 1 point. Give her 1 rose 50 times, you get 50 points. This is biological. See, it's a biological thing, which is, and we do still need to do a few big things. You got to do like birthdays, anniversaries, special occasion. That then sort of affirms that I'm special. But then you've got to do these little things, which has the big result, which is consistency. And so many men say, I make money, I do this, I do that. How can she feel not loved by me? Because she needs a lot of little things like affection. And one of my coaches, one of my coach trainer, he was talking to me the other day, and we have over thousands of coaches around the world that I've trained for 30 years. Only a few hundred really active ones. Now they've all gone on. They're doing other things too. They another course, but at meets, I work with them. And those coaches, what they'll do is a guy in a relationship, you say, okay, now it's the little things that make a difference. So list out to me 5 things you're going to do this week. One of the little things. And I say, okay, I'm going to write a little note on the mirror, a little sticky. I love you, honey. And then you take it away, gone. Now you're going to do another one, which is
Can it empty the dishwasher without being asked?
Exactly. Nice one. Empty the dishwasher without being asked. Plan a little date, something new and different coming up in 3 or 4 days. Make sure to notice what she's wearing and compliment her. When you give her a hug, whisper in her ear on Friday, "I love you so much. You're so beautiful." You see, just write out. And see, men don't do this stuff. Even in the middle of this conversation, it's hard for me to remember those things. But if you write them out, I'm going to do that this week. Then it's a goal. Already your brain is going to anticipate getting successful doing that. That will produce the testosterone that will motivate you to do that. If you just think, "Oh yeah, I'll do little things." For me, what I do, I just have formulas, okay, that keep my testosterone up. I get 4 hugs a day. I wake up, get a hug. I say goodbye to work. "Where are you? I'm going to give you a hug." I come home. I find her before the kids, give her a hug. For bed, "Oh, you're going to bed? Oh, first let me give you a hug." See, those hugs is and hugs are 8 seconds, and I don't rub my penis at her. You know,
that's called bumping and grinding, actually.
Right. So those are the little things. I always, when I go into the room, I stroke her hair. She said, "I need to feel seen and heard." What would make you feel seen and heard? She said, "Well, when you come in the kitchen, just come over by me and stroke my hair. Just a little, like petting a cat. Oh, just a little pet." And she likes that. Find out little things that your partner would like and acknowledge them. And 80% of women will tell you. 20% of women don't know what they would like. You have to just realize, it might even be a higher number now. It's not, you don't have to do that, because see, they're more on their male side. If my wife comes into the den, I don't need her to come over and touch me or whatever. I prefer.
But like in high school, one of the things you would do is you go to her best friend and like, "Hey, what is so-and-so like?"
Yeah.
So maybe that's I'm just trying to think of strategies to kind of do that.
The 3 things that make up trust. Here's what we know. It's 3 things that make up trust. And people think it's, I trust her, I don't, and it's not. The first is integrity. That's the honesty. Do I believe what you say? Do you say it? The second is competence. If you say you're going to meet me at a restaurant at 7, do you show up? Or do you tell me you forgot your wallet and you forgot they're late and you're not competent? And the third is goodwill. Do you have my best interests at heart? Do I believe you have them at heart? And those 3, that's the triad. So what happens is sometimes you're good in one of them. Your partner's very honest, but you don't feel like they have your back. So it's good because you can kind of work on each piece, which I like. You can kind of separate it out instead of like, "I don't trust you." And you're thinking, "What do you mean you don't trust me? I'm the most faithful guy there is." That's the reactions I get. And when I break down trust, men especially they love that sort of like, "Oh, it's that part. Let me work on that." So I would say to everybody, any man listening for sure, and woman, ask your partner of these 3 things. Where are we? Scale 1 to 6. Where are we here? Where are we here? Where are we here? And then you can work on that thing. But that's why this competition is the real devil of relationship. When you are a team, everything's a we. You don't, it's not your turn. I always say it's not your turn to put away the dishes. That's such craziness to me. I can't even go there. This turn thing, we're taking turns like we're in a game. It's insane. So I'm so worried they'll take advantage of me if I'm always putting away the dishes. Like, really? You're building a life with this person? You're worried about taking advantage of? Like, there's something very off here. And we know that when you're focusing on that, that's what you'll see more and more. You'll see the problems, you'll see the negative. So you've got to like train the brain to what you want to see and to ask for that. So your boundaries are your responsibility, not the other person's. And it's the victim mentality that's part of the problem, that I blame you for trampling my boundaries, but I'm not holding my boundary. So that's number 1, right? So if I say that something's important to me, and, please don't, like for women, sometimes it's something like, please don't comment on my weight or my exercise or my food. Like that's off limits, right? But then you're out to eat and maybe he says like, "Are you sure you need a second serving? Or why don't we go to this place that has like low-cal food or something?" You know what I mean? Like there's clearly some stuff there. The problem becomes not that he did that. I mean, that's not great. But it's not what people think are boundaries are actually just wants. People just have a want. They have like a thing they want. And the boundary part is when there's teeth on the other side. And by teeth, I never say consequences. It's not supposed to be punishing. It's a response I'm going to have when I've said I need something and you come over it. Or if I haven't said it yet, then now I have to say it. And I always say a boundary should never be said more than once. So you should go right to the thing. If I tell my kids, don't eat before dinner, and they eat before dinner, do you know what I mean? Like, I shouldn't have to nag them to not eat before dinner. I just have a response when they do it. Maybe they don't have an allowance that week. Maybe they don't have electronics. Maybe they take their phone away. You just do it. So I talk about boundaries on a continuum of thick to thin. A thick boundary is like if you called your dad sir, right? There's a lot of disconnection. There's a lot of separate lives living. A very thin boundary, a too thin boundary is when families are really enmeshed, right? If you knew what your parents' mortgage was growing up or something, like, information that's not, maybe your parent confided in you about the other parent or something, like that's very thin boundaries. What you want is for you to have your boundaries somewhere in the middle. They're not an exact middle, but somewhere in there. And you want to never change based on how someone else acts. Because here's what happens. I'll say I have a boundary around, I did this with my son not long ago about a curfew, and I have a boundary, but then he's being really good in keeping his curfew all the time. Right. So he's being good. So then he asks, can I stay out later? And I go, sure. Because he's been so good, I collapse my boundary. And then what would any self-respecting teenager do when they now can be out later? Be out really later.
Which becomes
and then, right? And then the kid, instead of coming home at 2, as they promised, comes home at 4 and maybe even smelling a pot, right? And then what do? I slam the door. I got too thin with my boundary. This is what's most common for people. Then they go all the way to the other side. You're grounded forever. In another relationship, I'm blocking you. I'm unfollowing you on social media. I'm never speaking to you again. We put up a wall instead of a boundary, and it's all fear-based. And we try to cut them off, which of course we don't really stick to generally. And it's because, again, but my boundary just needs to be the same. Doesn't matter if you're mean to me, if you're kind to me, if it doesn't matter. My boundary is my boundary. That's it. But that's where people fail the most. They change their boundary because they want to people please. They don't want people not to like them. And it's so interesting to me. Or someone else is telling you that you're being selfish by holding your boundary, which is the craziest thing, because so they're saying that that what they want is more important. So they're being selfish. But you're going, yeah, okay, that's selfish of me to do this. And in my book, I talk a lot about healthy selfishness. There's lots of research on it and how good it is for us. But it's not, I don't even like using that word selfish, really, because it's sort of crazy. It's just what we need to feel safe and okay. And so what my book does is just help people really get clear on what a boundary really is, how to make it, how to decide what's your standards, from your standards, what's the most important things to you. So it's not a boundary that my husband puts the cap on the toothpaste. That's just something I like. Do you know what I mean? But my boundary might be that I'm shown respect or appreciation, right? But you can't think to yourself, oh, leaving the cap off the toothpaste means he thinks I'm his maid and he doesn't respect me. And no.
I hope you liked that video. And if you did, make sure you check out this next video right here.
Whenever couples come to me, or anybody, individuals, and they say, oh, I'm struggling. And they always say it's communication every time. They're like, oh, we're not communicating. We need to work on communication.